Chapter 1. A Tea Dojo. At Football State of all places? Damien felt like his mom's minivan might not make it up the hills that kept him from the legendary Joyous Hollow. Joyous Hollow, of course, being the nickname given to the town surrounding Football State, where he would be attending his first year of college. Football State was renowned, of course, for its prestigious, by state school standards, engineering program. And its football team, I suppose. The Hollow Jaguars, named for a non-existent animal that the university administration swears existed at one point, were a fine team. Their program had an extensive series of wins over the past few decades, but the latest run of luck seemed to be against them. That did little to impede the enthusiasm of the students, who still filled the stadium and tailgating fields to the brim each game. Damien looked out the window, itching for the moment he might be able to get a glimpse of it. Wow, I can't believe I'm almost here, Damien thought to himself. Football State. I can't wait to start my classes, meet my roommate, and go to my first Hollow Jaguars game. Damien was an average guy with slightly pale skin and dark brown wavy hair. He wore a Football State athletic polo, bought just a week before today, and some khaki shorts. Despite his concerns, the minivan triumphed over the hills of the Hollows, and he was able to make it to his dorm. He arrived to find that his roommate had already fully moved in, but was nowhere to be found. After a heartfelt goodbye to his parents, and mostly unpacking his things, he was just taking in the view of his new living space, when he heard a knock on the door. It opened up right after. Hey, didn't want to startle you, he said. I'm Marcus. You're Damien, my roommate, right? Marcus stepped into the room. He had chestnut hair and blue eyes. He wore jeans and a black t-shirt with white text on it that read, "Who needs an English degree when you have engineering?" But the word engineering was spelled with a J instead of a G. This got a brief chuckle out of Damien. Yeah, that's me. Nice to meet you, Marcus, he said. The two quickly shook hands. Marcus went over to his side of the room and sat on the bed. Nice place we have here, right? I guess so, Damien said. I just feel in my head like maybe it should be bigger. Like a lot bigger. And 6 other people should live here with us, don't you think? Marcus paused for a moment and seemed to stare off 1,000 yards into the distance. He then briefly shook his head and stared back at Damien with confusion. No, that's insane. Why would you say something like that? Damien shrugged. Marcus went over to his cabinet and pulled out a small electric kettle. He grabbed a tea bag from his collection and placed one in a mug in preparation as the kettle started to heat up. Oh, are you a tea guy? Damien asked. Yeah, I like tea a lot. Why? Do you also? Not at all. Marcus paused for a moment. You're a strange guy, he said. I think we're going to get along great. The kettle continued to heat up as Marcus and Damien continued to exchange small talk, introductions, and little facts about themselves. After Damien felt like he was fully settled in, Marcus poured himself the hot water on his tea and booted up his computer to play a video game. Oh, by the way, Marcus said, you should totally stop by the club fair. There's so many different clubs here. Too many, actually. I don't think I got around to seeing half of them. Football State is a big school, after all, Damien said. But yeah, I'll be sure to go do that right now. Damien went out of his dorm, down the hallway and down the stairs, and then out into the campus of Football State. The club fair was right by the main student center, which was only across the street. As he got to the other side of the street and was about to walk into the student center, he felt his hair stand on the back of his neck a little. He turned around to suddenly see a completely unremarkable building that mostly hosted English and literature classes. That was weird, Damien thought to himself. I thought I felt something from that building for just a moment. I've never felt anything like that before. He shrugged it off and continued towards the club fair. There were rows on rows of posters and aggressive student club officers, desperate to get as many people as they could to pen their name down on their sign-up sheet and willingly give over their student email for their listservs. Damien felt the overwhelming nature of what Marcus had described to him. It really was too many clubs. Damien perused the headers quietly as he walked past. Telepathy Club, Body Improvement Club. Dang, there's just about anything you could ever want here. I don't want to sign up for too many, though. I'm here for school, after all. Damien felt a hand poke at his shoulder. For a brief moment, he felt his hair stand up again, but it dissipated much faster. He turned his head around. He saw a relatively tall guy with brown hair and a kind of vacant but genuine smile on his face. He waved politely. Hey, sorry, I just saw you walking by my booth here. My name's Jim, but you can call me Jim Prepared. Damien tilted his head. Cool, Jim. I'll stick with the first option. I'm Damien. What club are you pitching for? Well, let me ask you something, Damien. Do you like tea? Not at all. Jim paused, his rhythm clearly thrown off. He reached for a thermos of a hot beverage that he let rest on the desk. He pulled it to his mouth and took a sip. That strange feeling assaulted Damien's neck again, but he still could not for the life of him figure out why. The quick sip seemed to put Jim back on his game as he went back to smiling vacantly. "Would you like tea?" he asked. Damien's eyes widened. Now it was his rhythm thrown off as he thought to himself. "That's a good question. There's something kind of cool about tea, isn't there? Uncle Iroh from Avatar The Last Airbender loved tea, and he was really cool. Maybe I do want to like tea." He turned to Jim. "Yeah, I guess I would. So you're advertising a tea club?" Jim almost seemed to jump. Whoa now. It's not any club. We actually call it the Tea Dojo at Football State. There, you can learn about all different kinds of disciplines of tea. Well, 3 of them, actually. Okay, fine. Maybe just 2. But it's 2 really good kinds. "Disciplines of tea?" Damien asked. "What, like iced and hot? What are you even going on about? You know, on second thought, I see a Model UN club over there. I think I'll just go in." No. Whatever you do, don't do that." Jim, sensing he was losing his customer, just quickly stuffed a flyer into his hand. "You really just gotta see it to believe it. Come on by. We're having our first meeting this evening in the Old English building." He went right back to smiling and ushered Damien along so he could run the same playbook on the next person who walked by. He walked around the various clubs and got handed various brochures. He found little that he thought was all that interesting. As he headed back to his dorm, he found himself chucking most of the materials he got, except for one. He still held to the peculiar pamphlet that said Tea Dojo at Football State. He shook his head. He found it so odd. When Damien got back, Marcus was in his room playing a free-to-play browser game where you are a cube that eats other cubes to grow bigger and bigger. He looked up at Damien as he came in. "Find any good clubs?" he asked. "Well, I don't know about good, but did you see these guys?" Damien handed him a flyer. Marcus looked at it with incredulity. "What on earth is a tea dojo?" he asked. "Beats me," Damien said. "Sounds like such a strange thing. I couldn't tell if the guy was pranking me or something." "Well," Marcus said, standing up, "I think we should go grab a bite to eat and then check this tea dojo out." The 2 went to get dinner in the dining hall and then proceeded back up north. Damien and Marcus came up to the Old English building. From the outside, it was an unassuming 2-story building, not particularly tall or exceptionally wide. As they approached, Damien felt the back of his neck, not noticing anything wrong with his hair like he had previously when he was near it. He shrugged at this, and the 2 proceeded into it. They followed a few posters with arrows pointing down the stairs and into the building's basement. Shortly after stepping out, they saw a small classroom on their left, and what looked like it should have been another one on their right. However, there was a small aperture in the wall. A solid gray metallic window with slats was pulled down. By the door, there was a young woman standing there. She had bright blonde hair and fairly pale skin. Her nose was pierced, and she wore a dark black leather jacket and pants. She had 1 or even 2 gold rings on almost every single one of her fingers. Her eyes bored like sharp blades into the 2 roommates as they slowly and cautiously approached her. Marcus led, but Damien almost reached out to grab his arm before they got too close to her, thinking they must be in the wrong place, or that this was some kind of weird kidnapping cult. Before he could, though, she spoke to them. "Howdy, yins here for the tea dojo?" she asked. Her eyes softened and she smiled widely at them. "My name's Abigail, but everyone calls me Abby. Come right on in, fellas." She opened the door and waved them in. No one inside looked anything like her. Damien saw the familiar face of Jim Prepared in the back, seeming to mind the kettles as they came to a boil. Another figure seemed to be standing in front of a projector. He was a somewhat short guy wearing a salmon-colored collared shirt and khaki pants. He seemed to be fiddling with his hands nervously, as if he did not want to give a speech. His large glasses were over his eyes, which were slightly monolids, seeming to indicate some kind of partial Asian heritage. Marcus and Damien got distracted for a while browsing around when Abby slapped them on the back and pushed them towards a small table with 2 other prospective members sitting in front of an interesting tea setup. "Have a seat, fellas," she said. "Jack won't bite. Well, not people anyhow. He can have a mean appetite when he wants to." The Chinese student, presumably Jack, just shook his head as Abby teased him a bit. He had dark black hair and a kind of wave across his face. He also wore thick glasses. He seemed to wear a gentle smile, always seeming to be warm and inviting, even as he was taunted a bit. He was less dressed up than the presenter, wearing what appeared to be a high-quality t-shirt for a band that Damien did not recognize. "Yo, cool, you like Delirious Applesauce?" Marcus asked him. "Yeah, I do. I saw them in concert last summer." "Oh, that's so sick. I want to see them soon." "What's Delirious Applesauce?" Damien asked. "They're an indie med rock fusion band," Jack said. You can kind of think of them like hyper tiger cats, but they have more of an island folk feel. Damien nodded. He was sure those were all words, but silently objected to the idea that they could be combined like that and have any meaning. Marcus seemed to nod his head as if he completely understood it, though. He was in the middle of pondering a way to change the conversation to avoid showing his ignorance when the dressed-up individual tapped the microphone and cleared his throat. Hey, y'all. Is this thing on? Can everyone hear me? He asked. Everyone nodded or gave some kind of acknowledgement as the chatter came to a halt. The figure rifled through his notes quickly as he used his clicker to turn the projector on. An aesthetically pleasing cover slide saying Tea Dojo at Football State appeared on the screen before he went back to talking. Good morning, everyone. My name is Rick. I am the executive director of the Tea Dojo at Football State. It is my greatest honor to welcome you all here to our introductory meeting. This place has an executive director? What a bonkers title, Marcus said under his breath. Damien quickly kicked him under the table, worried the other two members might hear him. If they did, they certainly did not show it. Rick flipped the slide to the next one. He proceeded from this point on to not even follow the structure of what was on the presentation, and only occasionally reference it. So, why tea and why the dojo? That's the question I always lead with. It's interesting, right? Why do we have a dojo centered around tea, and why do we dedicate so much of our time around these leaves and this drink? Well, what if I were to tell you that tea is so much more than just a hot drink? What if I told you various cultures had ceremonies surrounding tea, and some of them even treat making tea like a discipline, as serious as one would train martial arts? I would call you crazy, Marcus whispered again. Damien kicked Marcus's leg again. This time, he was certain that at least Jack had picked up on him saying it. He seemed not to react at all, though. Damien looked around for a moment. There were several people snickering at this presentation. The senior members running the meeting seemed to be all used to this, and it did not bother them in the slightest. Rick flipped to his next slide. One of these we will be showing you today. It is called Gongfu-cha. It is the traditional Chinese tea ceremony, or at least a snapshot in time of the tea ceremony. Gongfu-cha practitioners mostly focus on how to make the best tea with the wares they have for the people that they're brewing for. Each of you has a Tea Dojo practitioner at the table with you who will be preparing tea for you in this fashion. Each table was brought a kettle to it with boiling water in it. Damien and Marcus's attention was drawn immediately to the strange-looking object in the middle of Jack's table. It was a saucer. On top of it, fit perfectly a tall bowl, about the size of a fist. On top of that, there was a lid. The lid was rounded to just not quite fully cover the bowl. Every piece of this implement was a beautiful white porcelain. What you see before you is called a gaiwan. Basically, that translates to lidded bowl. Fitting, right? This is one type of ware that we use to brew tea. We insert loose leaf teas into the gaiwan to brew them. No tea bags here. I'm getting ahead of myself, though. First, your tea practitioner is going to do a preheat, just to get the gaiwan and cups all warmed up for an even heat distribution. Marcus and Damien watched intently as Jack poured from the cast iron kettle into this gaiwan. Their attention was drawn to the porcelain white cups right next to it, on the bamboo mat that he had set up on. After putting the lid on the gaiwan, Jack let it sit for a while. Then, he grabbed the rim of the cup with his thumb and middle finger. With his index finger, he cracked the lid, pressing on the round slit protruding from it. With precision, he evenly filled each of the cups with hot water, filling each one perfectly. After another few moments, he poured them out into what appeared to be a decorative orange ceramic wastewater bowl. Rick cleared his throat and spoke again. So, today we are going to be brewing an oolong tea from Yunnan in China. I am going to be quiet now to let your tea practitioners focus. Jack carefully poured a bag of these dark green tea leaves into his hand and then into a tiny ceramic dish. He held them a few inches below his nose and took a few quick sniffs. He then handed it towards Marcus and Damien and offered for them to smell it too. They did. It was an interesting smell. It smelled roasted, almost like a campfire. It was not a kind of tea that Damien had ever smelled before. Marcus had oolong before, but never really examined the leaves it was made from. After it went around the table, Jack put it in the gaiwan. He then grabbed the kettle again. He raised the kettle slowly and deliberately. For the first time, Jack's friendly smile dropped from his face, and he looked deathly serious. Damien's hair stood on end again, this time more intensely than it ever had before. He grabbed at his neck. Marcus seemed to turn to him and stare inquisitively. Jack paused for a moment and seemed to exchange a glance with Abby across the room. She just nodded calmly, looking intrigued herself. Jack went back and gently poured the hot water onto the oolong leaves, going around in a circular motion around the edge of the gaiwan as he did. When it was about 4/5 of the way full, he put the lid over top of it. He brought his hand to the side of it and focused intently. Damien and Marcus were unsure of what he was doing and just continued to glance at each other. Damien's hair would still not go down, much to his confusion. Jack slowly grabbed the gaiwan again and poured the tea into the cups. Marcus noted how this time he did not fill them up all the way. He went around halfway into each cup before getting to the last one. The last cup he did fill up all the way, before snaking back around to fill up the rest of them. Marcus wondered what the meaning of this motion was. Damien was too distracted by his neck hair to pay it adequate attention. Jack smiled again when he was done. He removed the lid of the gaiwan and shook it a little gently. He showed everyone at the table the inside of the gaiwan. The leaves themselves almost looked like 30% larger than they were before, and sprawled out beautifully. Before it was hard to tell they were even tea leaves with how crumpled and dry they looked. But now they truly looked luscious and inviting. Some were even 2 or 3 leaves all rolled up into one stem, but once heated, unfurled into what looked like several dark greenish-brown flames of candles. Jack passed a small cup to everyone at the table. In focusing on the gaiwan and the brewing, they had hardly noticed the underwhelming smallness of the porcelain teacups. Marcus thought it was only about as wide as his thumb, and only a little taller, with a shape that started trim at the bottom and opened up wider up top. They each took the cup and thanked Jack graciously. Inside, it looked like tea all right. It was a light amber color, typical of oolong, and it shimmered in the light of the old basement ceiling lamps. The cup felt hot, but not scalding. Marcus and Damien eyed each other, before just shrugging and tasting the tea. The flavor hit Damien immediately. The tea had gentle earthy notes to it, and an ever-present taste of the roast that he had smelled on it. It was not an overbearing and off-putting roast, but as if someone had just taken freshly picked vegetables off a grill at a summer barbecue. Marcus internally, without communicating, picked up on the same notes. The tea had a warming sensation, not just because the drink was hot. As he tasted it, he felt himself transported to a memory of warm vegetable noodle soup after a snowy day. He had oolongs, and was vaguely familiar with this roasted flavor, but this was beyond anything. The vibrancy of the flavor, and the clean and crisp way each sip danced on his tongue. These two were so lost in bliss before Jack cleared his throat. "Tell me, do either of you see anything?" he asked. They turned their eyes towards him and almost stammered, trying to not drop their cups. A strange, barely perceptible aura appeared around Jack. It was somewhere on the spectrum between steam and the blurriness of a blacktop road on a hot summer's day. It had not been visible to them before the tea. Damien looked around. As Rick took another drink of his tea, he also seemed to surge with a similar energy. He turned to Abby, who before even taking a sip, also seemed like she was slightly simmering with this odd visual phenomenon. Marcus turned to the others at the table, who just seemed to be snickering and laughing as they held their pinkies out and jokingly drank the tea. He scanned the other tables, and based on the expressions, he could tell a handful of people were having the same reaction that he and Damien were. He turned to Jack and whispered, "I see. Energy. A kind of magic air around you. What is this? What's going on?" he asked. "We call it chachi," Abby answered instead. "Some teas, especially those harvested from old growth trees and handled well in production, can induce a kind of zen-like state in people. Some people are especially attuned to it and can harness it in ways never thought possible as they learn to master Gong Fu Cha. Congrats, new brews. It looks like the two of you might be candidates." Jack raised the lacquer kettle in his hand to pour over the tea for another time for a second brew. Marcus and Damien watched as he seemed to surge with this chachi, as they called it. Damien noticed his hair still moved a little, but seemed less aggressive. It was almost as if him being able to see the energy in the air made his body less hypersensitive to its presence. Rick continued on with his presentation, going over a high-level history of tea and its impact on culture. After some time, they called the lecture to a close. The majority of people left, seeming to chuckle and still just be passively amused by the silly display and devotion to tea shown by everyone here. The handful of people who were slow to leave, those were the ones who had their eyes open to chachi. Rick smiled and turned his face to everyone. "So, you're all the serious ones then. Good. I can never be bothered with the sugary matcha latte crowd. They don't see what we see here. They see a hot beverage that isn't as strong in flavor or caffeine as coffee. The rest of us, we see artistry, history, science, and culture, all rolled up into these magnificent leaves." He clenched his fist with passion as his glasses nearly fell off his face as he turned around with genuine enthusiasm. He updated his slide, showing a series of dates and other information. "Here's the deal," he said. "You can leave, treat this whole experience like the weirdest dream you ever had, or you can join us for the ride. In 12 weeks, we will have the Tea Dojo Tea Practitioner exam. It's a grueling 4-hour written exam all about tea, with the added component of a portion where we'll see how well you can perform Gong Fu Cha." Marcus, misgivings previously reduced by the display, slowly felt his sarcasm return to him. He had no chance to interject before Rick was back to talking again. "Of course, we don't expect you to do it all on your own. We will have weekly lectures here. In addition to that, you will join the lineage system. You and a handful of other hopeful practitioners will study and learn how to brew tea under the guidance of 3 of our most talented here. Our 3 teachers of this year's lineage are Jack. Hey there, he said, waving his hand around the room, smiling. Abigail. Call me Abby, she said, flashing a quick peace sign. And yours truly, Rick said, giving an awkward post-performance bow. The next time you all return here, you will pick one of us to study under. It's a decision that could radically alter the course of your tea career. Tea career? Marcus muttered. Damien nudged him. He was fully invested in this now, hanging on every word that Rick spoke after seeing the power of Chachi firsthand. Marcus rolled his eyes and crossed his arms, obliging and going quiet. He was still quite skeptical of this whole dojo and its weird rituals, but he could not deny that there was something special happening here. Moreover, Jack's tea was simply too delicious to go without ever having again. The members of the dojo dismissed the new recruits back to their dorms. Damien jumped up and down the whole way back, jittery from both the caffeine and the new exciting organization he found. Marcus walked alongside him, arms behind his head, not adjusting his pace for Damien's bouncing and making him wait for him to catch up. The rest of the week came and went as the two pondered their potential induction into this cult-like organization. However, as Saturday came around, they felt the true impact of the other cult they had joined come to fruition. Overnight Friday and Saturday morning, the campus was invaded by RVs as if they were Allied tanks liberating the football stadium and its surrounding fields. A civilization, a theocracy to the American sport, sprung up over the course of 24 hours. It was the first home game of Football State. The area around the stands was abuzz with people eating hot dogs, drinking beer, and playing all sorts of games in tents. Marcus and Damien were in awe of this scene. As they walked to the stands, though, Damien could not take his mind off the dojo. Whose lineage are you going to join? He asked. Jack's tea was so good. Abby seems so nice, even if I thought she looked a little intimidating at first. Rick is kind of a silly guy, but he also clearly knows so much about tea. Marcus scanned the sea of jerseys, pickup trucks, and grills as he walked along, considering Damien's question. Jack seems pretty cool, he said. I wonder if he'd want to go to the synth pop punk violinist concert that's happening later in the fall. Damien frowned, thinking this could not possibly be a real thing. The two made their way into the imposing Woodchuck Stadium, home of the Hollow Jaguars. Despite getting there super early, before the game, the student section seating up front was almost filled to the brim, and they were forced to take seats high up in the stands. They hardly considered it an issue, as the full view of the stadium was almost a breathtaking sight in and of itself. The periwinkle and silver, the two main colors of the team, seemed to overflow in every bleacher. The roar of the crowd sounded like a freight train as the kickoff started. Kwansei Wolfley got the ball and took off like a speeding bullet, weaving through defenders as he made it all the way halfway down the field before he got tackled. The energy in the stadium was electric as the fans watched the tides already start to turn on the barely known liberal arts school who had hardly paid the coach of their team. As the team huddled, a bit of rain seemed to sprinkle onto them. Wolfley looked up, accidentally getting a bit in his mouth. Damien's hair stood on end again. He quickly grabbed at it. Marcus looked at him. They both recalled how this happened in the Tea Dojo, and seemingly every time that Chachi was used. They exchanged knowing looks and scanned the sea of students in front of them. They did not recognize anyone from the dojo. As they were searching, the quarterback handed off the ball to Wolfley, who barely made it a foot before tripping over himself in a fit of exhaustion. Damien missed it, but watched the replay on the screen. There was nothing that should have tripped the running back up. He stared in absolute confusion. Suddenly, Marcus pointed down onto the field. Look, do you see that? Marcus asked. He directed Damien towards what appeared to be a kind of mist, obscuring just a small strand of the field. It was emanating out of one of the entrances to the bleachers, about a quarter of the stadium away from them. When Damien saw it, he had no doubts. It was Chachi, just like they had seen earlier in the week. He was now sure of what he previously thought, which was the hair on his neck reacted to its presence. The mist seemed to envelop the quarterback, and on the next play, he seemed completely unable to raise his arm with enough strength to throw the ball. He dropped it to the ground, and the other team recovered it. The stadium went into a dismal and depressed silence on what seemed to be a completely unforced turnover. Marcus and Damien turned to one another. We gotta get down there, Damien said. He rushed out and down the bleachers. Marcus looked surprised and shook his head as he followed after his roommate. What are you talking about? He asked. Why do we need to get involved? It's just a stupid football game. Plus, someone else should take care of it. No one else can take care of it. You heard Rick. Pretty much no one else can see this happening. Come on. I bet this coward will scram the moment he sees someone else is onto him. Marcus sighed. He clearly wanted to put up more of an argument, but just followed after Damien. Damien managed to get to approximately where he thought he had saw the Chachi slipping out from. When he examined the hallway into the bleachers, he could not see anyone though, and the traces of the attack seemed to disappear. Marcus scanned around as Damien scratched his chin, but suddenly called out to him. "Duck!" Damien's hair stood in time with the warning as he quickly dropped to the ground. As he did, a long string with a heavy attachment at the end of it swung right above his head. From behind the trash can, a man with a thick beard was seen popping out. He chuckled heartily, his tan skin covered with black hair, same color on his head in an afro. He stepped out into view, still swinging his weapon around by its string. On closer inspection, the weapon was a tea bag on an incredibly long string, but he was wielding it like a kusarigama, a traditional Japanese chain sickle weapon. The man was drenched in an aura of Chachi that made both Marcus and Damien tremble. Despite the irrationality of the thought, Damien could not help but feel like he could have died if that hit him head on. "Who are you?" Marcus asked. "My name is Ahmed Karim. I'm a former practitioner of the Tea Dojo at Football State. Based on your reactions, I take it you're some of the potential new recruits of the dojo." Damien gritted his teeth. "What on earth are you doing using Chachi on innocent people playing football? You could be getting someone out there seriously hurt." He let out another hearty chuckle. He revved up his teabag kusarigama again, and this time slung it at Marcus. He quickly rolled to the side to get out of the way. There was an intimidating clang that it made when it connected with the ground. Marcus looked around, waving his arms, gesturing for someone to notice this scene. Everyone else just seemed to walk by, staying out of the way of the three of them. "Don't bother," Ahmed said. "They can't see Chachi. Their minds can't process what is happening, so they just block it out. As for your question, I don't care about football. Antagonizing the home team was just how I figured I could lure out some plucky recruits. Now perish." He swung his teabag at Damien's legs. Damien jumped and stumbled out of the way, but on the return, it snagged him. He fell to the ground. Ahmed swung it back and with great strength launched it over his head, threatening to crush Damien's skull with it. Marcus stared on in horror. "Damien!" Right as the Chachi-infused weapon was about to collide with him, it suddenly met an equally ferocious force. It clanked and the bag seemed to shatter, scattering the loose tea leaves across the concession stands nearby. Marcus and Damien could hardly catch their breath from this near-death experience. When Damien managed to stand back up, he finally saw who had saved him. Abby held her Celadon green Gaiwan in hand, her own powerful Chachi radiating through the air. With her other arm, she dragged Damien out of the line of fire. "You all right there, new brew?" she asked. "Looked like a tough spill you took. Go over with Marcus. Let me handle this from here." Damien stared on in awe. After a few moments to process what she said, he ran over to Marcus. Ahmed just watched him in his periphery. He dared not take his eyes off Abby, who was now glowering at him. "Teabag kusarigama? Really, Ahmed? Why not a powdered sweet tea shuriken while you're at it, since you're already in the business of desecrating the leaves?" "Stand aside, Abigail. I'm keeping those miscreants from joining Rick's legion of lackeys. It's about time you abandoned that organization as well. We were such good friends before he brainwashed you against me." She scoffed. "Brainwashed? We fell out, Ahmed, just like you did with everyone else. And based on the fact you're trying to knock off new brews, I think we're the ones who landed in the right." "It's no use getting through to you," he said. "We should just settle this like we would in the dojo." He pulled a blade from his pocket. He brandished it. Marcus and Damien both jumped at the escalation. However, he quickly pulled out a round disc from another pocket. It was a compacted cake of tea. He started to chip away at it. The two's confusion only rose as Abby pulled a cake of her own out of her pocket. "Watch closely, new brews. You could learn a thing or two," she said. "This is called shungpuer. It's a special kind of tea, because it's fermented and compacted into what we call a cake. It's not everyone's cup of tea, literally. Kinda has a funky taste to it. I've come to love it, though." "Abby, what are you doing? Who is this guy?" Damien asked. "Well, this is Ahmed. He's a disgruntled member of the dojo who defected. As for what we're doing, well, we're having a brew-off. We're going to brew tea round for round, channeling all of our Chachi into it. The winner very well might knock out the loser into unconsciousness." Is this something that Chinese tea practitioners used to do? These brew-offs?" Marcus asked. "Heck no. We discovered it was a fun way of seeing who was better at Gong Fu Cha, though. Stand a safe distance away." After a while, Ahmed chunked off enough and was satisfied. He pulled his glass Gaiwan from his jacket pocket. "How much crap does this guy have in his pockets?" Marcus asked. He then pulled out a thermos from another pocket in his jacket. Marcus brought his hand to his face in frustration. Abby continued picking at her tea cake for a while, chunking off a considerable amount more. When she was done, she sat her gaiwan and matching celadon cups on the floor and unstrapped a large thermos of hot water from her back. Each of them sat, facing each other in the midst of the crowd that could not notice them. The stadium cheered as the game outside went back to normal. Abby and Ahmed stared at each other, each having 4 cups and a gaiwan before them. They nodded at one another and then started to brew their tea. The chachi in the air surging made Marcus stagger backwards from its intensity. Abby poured gently over her generously packed gaiwan, and Ahmed had less concern with it. He seemed to smirk to himself with delight. The two both held their hands near the base of their brewing apparatus and waited a bit. Abby made the decision to pour hers out almost a full 30 seconds before Ahmed did. As the full cups glistened with this mysterious tea energy, Abby slid hers over, and Ahmed slid 3 of his back in return. The cups glided as if friction no longer applied to them, and more miraculously, stopped right before their intended recipients, until everyone had 1 cup of each tea. Marcus tasted Ahmed's first. Abby was right about one thing. It was different, and not for everyone. There was a sharpness and citrus flavor to it. It felt a little coarse on the tongue, even acrid. However, there was something appealing to it, like a remarkably aged scotch. It sat around on the tongue in a way that left a favorable impression. Damien's eyes almost watered as he tasted Abby's, which was like all of the intensity socked him in the face. The tea, quite frankly, was astringent. Even Abby seemed to be slightly aware of this as she taste tested it. Ahmed chuckled. The two both stood from where they were. Ahmed stretched out his hand. The misty wave of energy that had afflicted the football players surged outward from him and towards them like a specter. Abby quickly swung her fists wildly, and bolts of chachi emitted from them, denting but not at all stopping the wave of crushing aura that smashed into the 3 of them. Marcus and Damien suddenly felt very exhausted, as if they could not stand. Abby seemed a bit shaken as well, but not nearly as much. Ahmed was still cackling when he spoke again. "What was that? Have the practitioners of Rick's dojo fallen to such a state of inadequacy that they can no longer make good sheng pu'er?" Abby just shook it off and went back to brewing again. She was less delicate with her leaves this time. Ahmed went back to it as well. Damien and Marcus watched on in shock as this spectacle took place. Waves of blurry radiation seemed to waft off both of them as they did a second brew of their tea. They were both nervous as the next cups came around. Ahmed's tea again was somewhat citric and oddly refreshing. It was almost like an identical copy of the tea they just had a few moments ago. This could not be said about Abby's tea. This brew was much less bitter and felt softer on the mouth too. There was still this overwhelming sense of the tea being far too strong. The two stood and clashed again. Abby's fists managed to dissipate most of the blast coming her way, but Marcus and Damien still got hit with the collateral. They both felt exhausted again. "This lady's gonna get us both killed," Marcus thought to himself. Damien trembled. "Abby, what are you doing? He's winning. We're getting destroyed out here." She glanced back and shot him a reassuring smile. "Don't fret, young new brew. This is going better than I could have even hoped." Damien and Marcus looked shocked and less confident by this than ever. They went back for brew 3. The cups slid across again. This time, things were noticeably different. Despite giving it so much more time to steep than Abby's did, Ahmed's tea started to taste like a ghost of itself. It was almost as if they were tasting water, flavored like the tea they had earlier. However, Abby's tea was now reaching a new sense of vibrancy. Damien got notes of grapefruit, even smelled of burning wood, which came through the tea as a pleasant flavor. The smokiness came through to Marcus as well, and even hints of espresso were in there. And notably, all of this came through without any of the astringency present in Ahmed's first brew. The two clashed again. This time, Abby had a burst of tea energy engulf her. Her hands were enveloped with the visual phenomenon. Marcus and Damien watched as 2 spectral hands appeared in front of her and started punching through the air as they sent shockwaves through it. These bursts of chachi cut through Ahmed's ripple like it was nothing, and he fell on his back. Damien jumped up and down as he no longer felt the draining effect of Ahmed's attack. "Astral Fist Chachi," Abby said, announcing her move like a professional wrestler. "Wow, what did you just do?" Damien asked. "I overdose my pu'er when I brew it," she said. "It makes for a rough first cup or two, but when you have a high dose later on, you really get every shade of this tea. Pu'er's a complex gal, like me, and you need a lot of experience with her to get every note she has to offer." Ahmed stood back up. His nose was busted, as the spiritually projected martial arts seemed to manifest themselves in actual injury. He went back to his tea setup. He poured with vigor over his tea, a heavy stream attempting to extract every last bit of flavor that he could from the leaves. Abby returned to hers as well, pouring more strongly than she had before, but not in the same dramatic sense as Ahmed. The two served their tea again. Ahmed's now still had a bit of life in it, but it was still a faded memory of what it once was. However, Abby's tea only got more and more dynamic. The bitterness was all but gone, but the flavor still persisted. The tea's profile now taking on a more floral and delicate flavor, without sacrificing the fullness. She launched a flurry of fists, which all resulted in hit after hit to Ahmed's gut. He barely managed to stay on his feet this time, but he was dry heaving now. He clutched at his waist and shook his head. Fine. You've made your point. I'll take my leave and let you and you fools be. She tilted her head. Sorry, I don't recall us agreeing to a number of rounds. This tea is going to go until it's out of flavor, or until your maw's too broken to swallow it. Ahmed trembled. Abby went back to pouring her tea, this time with a heavier pour. Ahmed did as well. The two brewed their tea for longer than they had before, especially Ahmed, who was desperate to make it taste like anything, with the leaves as spent as they were. Marcus and Damien tasted it again when it was time. Ahmed's tasted like diluted hop water, whereas Abby still had plenty of citrusy kick to it. Abby swung an astral uppercut into her opponent, knocking him to the ground. His lights temporarily went out, and when he came to, she was standing over him. He wailed and babbled in front of her. No, please, Abigail. Remember the good times we had. We were friends. Please don't kill me. She shook her head. You think that's what I'm going to do? You still don't get me, Ahmed. I'm not vengeful, folk. I am practical, though, and those hands are too dangerous to be allowed to keep brewing. No, he cried, and turned to the other two. Please, stop her. The Tea Dojo is a wretched place, and that charlatan Rick is harboring a dark secret. You have to believe. She mimed grabbing something in each of her hands, and then she clenched her fists tightly. Ahmed wailed in pain as she broke his fingers with the power of Chachi, disfiguring them in a way that they would never quite fully heal. Overwhelmed by the pain, passed out. Abby picked up his gaiwan and pocketed it along with the cups. She stored her own away as well. As soon as her aura dissipated, it was like each passerby awoke suddenly from hypnosis. They all gathered around the broken Ahmed, acting as if he had suddenly fainted in front of everyone. They called medical to his location. Abby patted Marcus and Damien on the shoulders as she ushered them back along to the student section. Sorry Yins had to see that, she said. I don't like doing anything like that to people, but if he was brazen to attack two innocent folks like you, I can't imagine who else he would be misusing his Chachi against. They went back and enjoyed a normal football game. The Hollow Jaguars managed to turn things around and win 47-7. On the way back to their dorm, Damien was jumping around with excitement. He did a small, energetic imitation of the fighting moves that Abby had mimed to use against Ahmed. Boom! Pow! He said. And then she was like, Hiya! Take this Shungpuer-powered kick, you villain! Marcus shook his head. I know. I was there, remember? It was pretty sick, I guess. Pretty sick? It was incredible. She was so punk rock, and yet so calm and collected. She never lost a beat for a minute. I'm so excited to learn more about Kung Fu Cha. The weekend flew by in a flash, and before they knew it, Marcus and Damien were back in the basement of the English building. Rick stood before a group of them. So, do we have any volunteers who want to go first to say what lineage they want to join? Marcus and Damien both shot up their hands excitedly. I want to join Abby's lineage, Damien said. I want to join Jack's lineage, Marcus said. Damien nearly fell over in confusion. He slid up close to Marcus. Dude, what? After all that? Jack just smiled. Awesome, dude. I can't wait. We're going to be listening to Werewolf Grandpa Symphony for every brewing session. Hey, Marcus said, as long as it's not their second album, Receipts of a Yellow Chicken. That was way too sadistic jazz for my taste. They both laughed and Damien just buried his face in his hands. There was no amount of Chachi in the world that would ever give him the ability to keep up with music. However, for now, the two had both begun their first steps into the wild world of the Tea Dojo, Kung Fu Cha and Chachi. Little did they know the journey that awaited them. Thank you so much for listening to this chapter of Tea Dojo at Football State. If you enjoyed, please rate the podcast, give it a like on YouTube, or share with someone else you think might also enjoy. You can stay up to date with Tea Dojo at Football State by following us on social media. There'll be D-Squared stories on just about any of the major platforms. If you prefer reading to listening stories, also follow us on Substack, also D-Squared Stories. Thanks again for listening, and I hope to have you listen again next week.